We're taking a break from the Sacramento Kings coaching search for a second to ask the question, should the Sacramento Kings consider signing Victor Oladipo in free agency this offseason? Even though the last couple of seasons have been plagued by injuries, Oladipo still, I believe, has a lot to offer a team. And today on the Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to be joined by ESPN 1320's Jesse Tapia. We are going to talk about why this move could be the exact move Monty McNair has been waiting for, a low-risk, potentially high-reward move. It's all in today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off-season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. Just wrapped up my 8th season covering Sacramento Kings basketball. I've been a fan of the Kings for much, much longer than that. And this is also year 5 for me hosting the Locked On Kings podcast. I currently work for ABC 10 News in Sacramento. And like I said in the intro, we're taking a little bit of a break from the Kings head coaching search. I know that's the big news in Sacramento Kings land right now. If you missed over the weekend my podcast talking about the 3 finalists, Mike Brown, Mark Jackson, and Steve Clifford, I did kind of an overview podcast there. And coming up later this week on Locked On Kings, actually potentially tomorrow, I'm going to be joined by another guest. We're going to talk specifically about former Warriors or current Warriors coaches. We're going to talk about both Mark Jackson and Mike Brown, and why they could be good fits for the Sacramento Kings, whether or not the Kings should consider avoiding them, why overall the Sacramento Kings continue to try and pull their coaches from the Golden State Warriors in an attempt to just be the Golden State Warriors. So that's all coming up later on this week on Locked On Kings. But for today's episode, I thought, you know what? Free agency is going to be another big part of this offseason after hopefully all this coaching stuff is figured out, after the draft is figured out. And typically free agency, it's not a very successful time for the Sacramento Kings. They usually struggle. If they get big names, it's usually towards the end of their careers, or they had to massively overpay, or they're coming off of maybe significant injuries, which is why Victor Oladipo perfectly fits the, hey, maybe this is a kind of guy that the Kings could go out and get. And remember, Oladipo not too long ago was one of the exciting young athletic stars in the NBA. He's bounced around a lot recently because of his just catastrophic injury issues that he has had. But Oladipo could be someone who could come in and at best solve the Kings' starting 2 issues. At worst, collect a paycheck and sit on the bench or sit at home with another injury. Jesse Tapia from ESPN 1320's D-Lo and KC show. He's their producer. You also hear him on the show with the two of them many, many times. He actually presented this to them. I overheard it, loved the conversation, wanted to continue that conversation here on Locked On Kings. So welcome to the first time for the Locked On Kings podcast, ESPN 1320's Jesse Tapia. Free agency has never been a strong suit for the Sacramento Kings, but hey, maybe they can make their own little splash in the way of Victor Oladipo, and I cannot claim this topic or this idea. I got to give all credit to my man and my guest here for the first time, hopefully of many here on Locked On Kings, Jesse Tapia. He is the producer of the D-Lo and KC show on ESPN 1320, but much more than that, also gets involved with the fellas on the air, like when he's presenting an idea like this that they didn't seem too excited about. I think Kenny gave it some run, but I love the idea. I love the idea of Victor Oladipo potentially in Sacramento, and here to talk about it a little bit more is Jesse. What's up, my man? Welcome to Locked On Kings.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, Victor Oladipo, that's a guy I think he can definitely help, I think.
So where'd this idea come from? You were just perusing free agency and you saw his name, or like has he been on your radar a while?
He's been on my radar for a while just because I've been kind of following him because my brother, he follows the Heat too. So I've been talking to him, whatever, what's going on with Oladipo. And I think, I don't know, I just kind of put 2 and 2 together, you know. The Kings, they need a 2-guard, obviously, even with Dante if he's there. And I just felt like it's kind of slim pickings with free agency and all that. So you get a guy who maybe needs an opportunity to keep going, and I think he'd be a good fit.
I'm glad you brought up Dante DiVincenzo right away, because you don't necessarily want to make personnel decisions based off of who you already have on your roster. Or in DiVincenzo's case, he's a restricted free agent. We expect him to be back. The Kings have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble making draft decisions based off of who they have on their roster. But how do you envision, assuming Dante DiVincenzo comes back? DiVincenzo is probably going to be getting paid more money than Victor Oladipo would be paid in this scenario or in the open market because of Oladipo's injury history. Like, do you imagine Oladipo coming in and there being a battle for that starting 2 spot, assuming Oladipo is healthy? Do you expect him to be a backup, a starter? What are you thinking with Oladipo there?
See, this is the one I kind of get stuck on, because I think one of the biggest issues with the Kings this season is that we didn't really get to see Dante play with Fox or anything like that. So we really don't know who's going to play with who. Maybe Davion starts, or like I said, maybe it's Dante. I think, personally, I would like to take the risk, just go with Victor Oladipo right next to Fox. I think they play well next to each other. I think you need someone who plays defense next to Fox, and Dante's all right, but I think Victor, he could still be a better defender next to him. He can handle the ball a bit. I think Dante or Victor would be the best one out there.
Yeah, looking at Oladipo, I mean, it's been brutal for him over the last few seasons. He played only 8 games this season for the Miami Heat. Played just 33 games the season before, 19 games the season before that, 36 games the season before that. So injuries have not been kind to Victor Oladipo. But in this situation, if you're the Sacramento Kings or any team that's signing Oladipo in free agency, right, Jesse, you're not paying top dollar for him.
Yeah.
Like, you're not paying for Oladipo from the Magic, who is this young stud that everybody was excited about, who I think won like most improved player at one point. You're not paying for that. You're paying for a journeyman at this point who's trying to stay healthy, trying to reinvent himself, and Sacramento might make a lot of sense for him in that sense.
Yeah, because he was on with Woj on Woj's pod like last week or so. I was listening to him talk, and he seems like a guy who's got it, like a good grasp of what his situation is right now. He was talking about how he's just honestly grateful that he's still out here and grateful to be getting minutes. And he knows, like, yeah, he's not going to be getting a ton with Miami. So he seems to have a good grasp on, like, exactly what his situation is and what his career can be going forward if he has one.
I didn't realize this. Victor Oladipo is actually turning 30 in not too long, in a few days here. It's crazy to think Victor Oladipo and Harrison Barnes are the same age. I would have thought Barnes was way older than Victor Oladipo, but 30 is certainly not old by any means. But Jesse, in this situation, are we talking about like a low risk, potentially high reward situation here for the Sacramento Kings, or is that kind of overdoing it?
I think it is low risk, high reward, because honestly, like, let's say that they do bring in Victor. We all know the injury history. You just said the amount of games he's been playing the last few seasons. Like, if Victor Oladipo were to come in and he can't play, like, I don't think that's something that's going to make or break the Kings season. Like, oh, Victor's not playing, we're screwed. Like, yeah, I don't think that's it. I think what they do at the 2 guard, whether it's Victor or someone else, it's going to be kind of like, how do you say, not like a quick fix, but something where a placeholder type, where whether it's Dante, Victor, or anyone else that's available to give it free agency, like, it's not going to be something that's going to keep you from the playoffs.
Yeah,
it's more so like, let's see what he can do, and if it works, then we're golden.
Yeah, it's an expectation thing that fans would have to tamper, right? And hopefully most Kings fans would see a Victor Oladipo signing and not get overwhelmed by the excitement of, man, Victor could reinvent himself and change the Sacramento Kings and be a part of a championship team one day. We would love that base case scenario to come true. But if you can get Victor Oladipo for 65 games and he can be 75% of what he was in his time with the Orlando Magic before all these injuries kind of undercut his career, like, that might be exactly what the Sacramento Kings are looking for here. And they might only have to pay $3 or $4 million to get that.
Yeah, because if you bring him on, even if, because I don't expect them to play 82 games or anything like that. That's obviously not possible, I don't think. So if he, like, say he needs a rest on a back-to-back or whatnot, you plug in a guy like Dante, and I don't think there's much drop-off right there as far as for a game if you need him.
So one of the things you said earlier that I think is really important to note too is we're talking about Victor Oladipo in a limited sense that could potentially come in, be plugged in alongside De'Aaron Fox, and can add a defensive presence that the Kings have been looking for a while. I also believe that Dante DiVincenzo can add that defensive presence. But what is it about Victor Oladipo specifically that you could see as a good fit next to De'Aaron Fox?
I think that he can play on the perimeter a little bit better than, most or whatnot. You can keep him around their space to flow with him a bit. And I think, too, where Fox, we know his defense, I'm just going to say, it was horrible this season. It was a big story all year. His defense was horrible, and we really didn't see it pick up at all. And if you have Victor out there, he can take maybe the best scoring guard or whatnot and kind of take the load off of Fox. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I would start him next to him. Because like Dante, like I said, he could play defense too, but I think Victor's a little bit better on that end. So the defense would be one thing where he can help pick up from Fox.
Oladipo is a career just around or just under 35% three-point shooter. So he's not someone who's going to terrorize anybody from the perimeter, but at least someone that you have to respect in that sense. So in terms of spacing the floor, he can fit well with that as well. What about the potential of Victor Oladipo with Domantas Sabonis? Do you think that there's a good fit between the two of them there, that they can play off of one another? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's another pro as to why like adding a guy like Victor would help, because you need a little bit of some familiarity or whatnot with Domantas and all those guys. So he's been there before, so it's not really going to be something where like I got to get used to him or whatnot. I think that would help a lot, and yeah, I think he'd be playing really well next to Sabonis.
Yeah, what is the maximum amount of money in theory that you would be okay with paying Victor Oladipo? He made just over $2 million this season for the Miami Heat. Can't imagine him getting too much more, although the Kings have to overpay typically to attract talent. And I imagine the Kings, if they are suitors or interested in Victor Oladipo, they're not going to be the only team. There is going to be a team out there that recognizes that you can take a flyer on him for cheap and potentially cash in on that. So what are you comfortable at saying, like, this is the maximum amount I would pay for Victor Oladipo?
Honestly, I just try to keep him around the minimum. Probably wouldn't go higher than 5, because like as much as I do want him on the Kings and all that, like there's a point where like, yeah, you can't overpay for Victor Oladipo if you don't know what you're gonna get. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd keep it. I wouldn't go any higher than 5 or anything like that. Try to keep it around the minimum.
Even when Oladipo's been battling all these injuries, you look at the scoring numbers that he's been putting up from his time in Indiana. You mentioned playing alongside Domantas Sabonis, 2018-2019. When he played just 36 games, he was averaging 18.8 points per game. The entire 2020-2021 season combined, where he was on 3 different teams, which is crazy to think about. He averaged 20 points per game that season, just shy of 20 points the season before. It's pretty crazy. 14.5 points per game the season before. It's pretty crazy to think about, even with the injuries that have probably taken some of his youth, his bounce, his athleticism that he was known for away. Like, it's pretty crazy to think about how good of a scorer he could be. And if you get 10, 12, 13 points per game out of him in whatever role, that could be a tremendous win for the Kings offensively.
Yeah, because you're not bringing in Oladipo to come in and drop. We don't like Victor. We need you to drop 20. That's not going to happen. Victor's probably the 4th option on the starting 5 or whatnot. If you can get anywhere from like 13 to 14, like you said, that'd be perfect. Because I mean, you see him come in. I mean, off of injuries, barely even played this season. Comes in against Atlanta in a closeout game and he drops 24. I mean, he's out there facilitating and whatnot, so he can still hoop. And I think too, if he's not one of those top options, like I said, Fox going to get the ball a bunch or whatnot. If he's not a top option, I think it's going to take the workload off him, and you'll be able to maximize what's left of him.
What is any concerns that you might have with Oladipo coming here? Again, we think it's pretty low risk. If you pay him only a little bit of money, he ends up missing the whole year with injuries again, or just doesn't fit. He sits on the end of your bench. It's not really that big of a deal, all things considered. But are there any concerns in your mind of, hey, Oladipo might come to Sacramento and view this as a personal opportunity rather than play for the team and try and get his numbers and get his next contract more than get Sacramento to where they want to go? Is that a concern of yours, or any concerns that you have in general about Oladipo?
Like I said, like after listening to him talk with Woj, I don't think like he's Victor Oladipo time, I'm gonna get mine. I don't think that's gonna be it. I think the biggest issue is you got, if we bring him back, Dante, Victor, Terrence Davis, and Justin Holiday still there. I mean, that's 4 2 guards and whatnot. And I mean, you probably have to move on from Holiday before you can bring on someone like Victor, just because it's too crowded out there for the 4 of them. You're going to have to move on. And I mean, if you do let's say we end up trading Holiday, you end up with Terrence Davis, Dante, and Victor, like who's losing minutes in that? Because another thing too, Victor's shooting, it's not great. His 3-point shooting, it's decent or whatnot, but we know this Kings team desperately needs shooting out there. And I think, yeah, that'd be kind of a fault, because if you're leaving a guy like Terrence Davis on the bench, I mean, who's going to score for you?
One concern I have about Oladipo personally is he's not the most versatile of player. And what I mean by that is, of course, we don't know who the next head coach of the Kings is going to be. And that what he brings to the table will completely change the conversation that we're having right now. But if Oladipo is not playing the shooting guard position at 6'4", he's I guess, a point guard. And when you have De'Aaron Fox, you have Davion Mitchell, I expect the Kings to go out and get another primary ball handler as a third option. I'm not opposed necessarily to having some sets with Oladipo running the offense if both of those guys, Fox and Mitchell, need to take a seat. But we also see the Kings like to play small a lot, especially with both Fox and Mitchell on the floor together. And I question whether or not Oladipo is capable of playing the three in the modern NBA at this point in time with the speed and athleticism of modern day threes.
Yeah, I don't think the three would be I don't think it'd be a good fit for him either. I think if he's not playing the two, then he's going to need to be handling the ball as the one and whatnot. So I don't think playing the three would really work out for him either.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including the NBA playoffs going on right now, the start of Major League Baseball, all that is happening there. Plus, they have golf, fighting, UFC. When football season's going around, they hit football season very, very hard. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. And if you're following this coaching saga for the Sacramento Kings, you, of course, can bet on that. You can bet on future bets like the Kings win totals for next season when those come out, the championship odds for the Sacramento Kings next season. You can bet on that. Make sure you're using your Kings knowledge to make some money. Head to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends and the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. If Oladipo were to come off the bench, which in my opinion, assuming Donte DiVincenzo is still on the team, that's probably more than likely going to be the spot. Now, if he works himself into a starting position, meaning he's played well enough to earn a starting position, I'm all for that. I think that's Donte DiVincenzo's spot at this point in time, or even Davion Mitchell is ahead of him. But let's just assume in this scenario that it's Fox and DiVincenzo as your starting 1 and 2. Davion Mitchell and Victor Oladipo kind of as your backcourt coming off the bench. What do you think about the two of them being able to play together? I have some offensive concerns, but defensively, there could be a lot there too.
Yeah, defensively, I think it'd be fine. Offensively, it's not a lot of shooting. I mean, we still got to see Davion look good towards the end of the season, but we still got to see what he can do in his second season. And yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be a lot of good shooting out there. But I think, this is where it's not just Victor Oladipo. Monty's got to add other guys to where maybe it can work or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just you add Victor Oladipo and boom, we're there. No, you still got to add the other pieces to make it work. Where if he is coming off the bench, we do have someone who's playing a three who can shoot the three ball or even a stretch four or whatnot. We shoot the three ball. I think, yeah, you're right. You're right. The offense, like, it wouldn't work, but you still there's pieces that you need to add still.
I love that you said that. I love that you said this can't be like the only move Monte McNair makes. And I think that's the real key here is we're not talking about Victor Oladipo being a day 1, 2, or 3 free agency signing. We're talking about later on down the road. And in my opinion, the Kings need to focus a lot of their attention this offseason on trying to figure out what that 4 spot is going to be or who's going to be playing next to Domantas Sabonis in the front court. Then they can go to answer this 2-guard spot where Victor could be a cheap option to, if nothing else, give Donte DiVincenzo a little bit of competition. But can you build off that a little bit more, Jesse, why you think it's essential for the Kings to cover other positions and fill their other positions before taking a look at a guy like Victor?
Because I think, like, if you look at the roster right now, I don't think the two spot is like their highest priority. At least it should be. I think your biggest issue right now is at the 4, and like I said, you still need shooting. So I feel like if you address the 4 position with, I don't know, you trade for a John Collins or whatnot, one of those big name guys who have been kind of rumored to maybe they're going to be gone from their teams. You add someone like that, you add the shooting, then I think boom, we had a big, and it's kind of like now it's all starting to mesh together.
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. Are there other teams that you imagine could be interested in Victor, or Victor would be a good fit for some of those teams? Do you think, Are there any teams that come to mind that make sense for him?
So there's a team in Los Angeles where it's purple and gold who has all this money tied up in their top 3 players. And basically their MO is let's sign the minimum guys. I think the Lakers, that's the one that scares me the most. I think the Lakers come to Vic, hey, we can't pay you a lot or whatnot, but we have championship aspirations. Yeah, we think you'd be a good fit there. I think the Lakers would be one of the top teams who could look for a guy like Victor Oladipo.
Are there other names in free agency that you've taken a look at that are Victor Oladipo-esque in terms of not going to be too much money, potentially Low risk, high reward. Are there any other names out there? I know Damian Barling brought up DeMarcus Cousins potentially. I'm a little iffy on DeMarcus returning to Sacramento. I think that ship has sailed personally, but he said if you're focusing on Victor Oladipo potentially, you also have to take a look at DeMarcus as a center option. Probably not as a starter next to Sabonis, but certainly as a backup. And he did a very good job in the playoffs backing up for Jokic. So is DeMarcus on your list? Are there other players on your list that you're keeping an eye on?
I don't think DeMarcus. I don't think that would work. As far as like other guys, I've been looking at a lot of the twos in free agency. As far as like what could help if it wasn't Victor, Lonnie Walker. I think he could help, but I think he earned himself a nice little deal towards the end of the season with the Spurs. Honestly, it's Malik Monk. The Kings need shooting. They need a two guard. Malik Monk is that guy. And he's someone too where I think he'd be perfect next to Davion. You don't need him. Like, he's not going to play defense or whatnot. He's not great, so I don't think you can start him next to Fox. You bring in a guy like Monk off the bench, and he shot, I think it was like 39% from three this season, averaged about 13 points per game, which was his career high. I think he'd be perfect for this team off the bench.
I know you like Monk. I know Kenny Caraway likes Monk. I like Malik Monk too, former teammate of De'Aaron Fox also. It's important to mention. But am I wrong in saying why would the Kings need a Malik Monk when Terrence Davis is already on this roster? Is that a fair statement, or do you think they're very different players, or do you trust one more than the other?
I like it. Terrence Davis, though, he was pretty inconsistent, I'd say, when he did get time. Like, injuries aside, even when he was out there, he was still, sometimes you get 5 points from him or whatnot. You get a 20-point game or whatnot. I think Malik, he's a little bit more consistent. You get more of that, like I said, consistent, 10, 12 off the bench from him.
Stepping away from the free agency conversation, it's the hot topic right now in Sacramento Kings land. The Kings finalists, 3 finalists for their head coaching position came out. Mike Brown, Steve Clifford, Mark Jackson. Not the most inspiring list, in my opinion. I want to know what your reaction was when you saw that list come out, and is there any name out of the 3 that rises to the occasion for you?
Yeah, so when I saw the list, I was like, okay, Monty, he's playing it pretty cautious here. All right, because I looked at it, and like Mike Brown, like he's had winning seasons with Braun, but they're winning seasons, no doubt. Steve Clifford, he had some winning seasons with Charlotte, had one with Orlando. Mark Jackson, I don't like that, but I think Monty's really playing it cautious here because I look at the Kings and they're not like a Charlotte type where like you need a coach to help you get over that hump. And Charlotte has they have their core set or whatnot, and I think their culture. The Kings, they're still trying to build a culture. I think they're still starting from scratch, even though you got a guy like Sabonis and Fox there as the how do you say, the
foundation?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the foundation. All right, I think a first-year coach coming in, bringing his own ideas, like a Will Hardy type, okay, coming from an organization like San Antonio and Boston, bringing some of that culture, and I think that would have helped a lot. And I think with Mike Brown, Mark Jackson, and Steve Clifford, like, yeah, they're good, but I just, like, how long are they going to be here for? And it's just, it feels real safe to me. Kind of like we need to get to the playoffs. These guys have been here. They've coached before. Like, they know how to do it. Let's go with one of these guys because we know at least we've seen it. And I really think they've really played it safe here.
Safe and underwhelming. Well, I'm sure you, D-Lo and KC, are going to talk a lot about that on D-Lo and KC this week. And if any other free agency thoughts come to mind, potential candidates come to mind, I know you'll talk about that there as well. And maybe we'll snatch it again for some more Locked On Kings content this offseason. Jesse, man, you're so great. I love the work that you do with D-Lo and KC. So glad I finally was able to get you here on Locked On Kings, my man. Hopefully we'll do it again very soon.
Definitely. It was fun. Thanks for having me on, man.
Today's Locked On Kings podcast also brought to you by Built Bar, longtime friends and sponsors here of the Locked On Kings podcast. With summer coming, you're going to need some food on the go, and Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. You can throw them in your bags, in your kids' backpacks, make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled for your summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bars is that they're healthy and delicious. It's a mixture of both. You don't have to choose one or the other. All Built Bars and their puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with that Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And you might have heard me say puffs and have no idea what that is. Built Bar puffs are protein-infused marshmallows. Yeah, that's a real thing. Add that and all their great flavors in addition to the many flavors from Built Bars, and you have yourself a delicious, fun way to eat healthy. Built Bars are 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar. It's not even close. Go to Built.com, get all your favorites right now. Try the puffs, try the different flavors, and whatever you order, use Locked15 for 15% off. Again, that's promo code Locked15 for 15% off at Built.com. Huge thank you to Jesse for joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast. It was a real pleasure having him on. We want to hear your thoughts on Victor Oladipo to the Sacramento Kings. I know there are going to be a lot of fans that probably roll their eyes at it. Maybe you're not interested. That's totally okay. It's a name that we have not heard connected to the Kings other than this conversation that Jesse and I are having and the conversations on ESPN 1320. So I couldn't tell you the likelihood of it happening. I just know I like the possibility of Victor Oladipo coming to the Sacramento Kings. Hope you enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you will join me for my next conversation on Locked On Kings. Kyle Madsen from Bay Area Sports Radio, from the game in the Bay Area. He is going to be joining me. Spent a lot of time in Sacramento at Sports 1140 KHDK, former colleague of mine. He and I are going to discuss Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, the Golden State Warriors coaching history, and why the Sacramento Kings seem to be so enamored with it. That's all coming on the next episode of Locked On Kings. I really hope you will join me for that. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.